Hey y'all, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to check out another one of my videos. Today I'm super excited for the video, not only because it's a very unique video idea, but also because I am going to be collaborating with another YouTuber here on YouTube, Linda, or Glitter Fallout as she's known here on YouTube. I have been wanting to do a collab with her for I feel like forever, but I've always just put off asking her because I'm terrible at coming up with ideas, and if I ask a YouTuber, I typically like to have an idea in mind. I don't just want to be like, hey, you want to do something? Let me know what you want to do. So I've been putting it off for I feel like forever because I've just been in this rut with creative ideas to do with other YouTubers. But you know, she asked on her stories like, who should I collaborate with? And I was finally like, you know what, let me just ask. So I said me, and she replied back and was like, hey, I'd love to, you know, do a collab with you and let's try and think of an idea. So we hashed it out. I'm so sorry to Linda because I have put this off once before. We were supposed to do this way back in May, June, I forget, but it's been a while. We pushed it off and she was very kind and understanding with my schedule. So we're finally doing it today and I'm so excited. I wasn't gonna push it off again. I know I just am coming back. This is like my first video back after like a 2-week break, but I was like, I can't push it off anymore. So I am pre-filming this before my break and I'm gonna edit it and have it set to go. And yeah, this is my first video back. So thank you guys so very much for being so very cool with me taking 2 weeks off. I really do appreciate it. And yeah, let's just go ahead and get right into today's video. Today we're gonna be going through our eyeshadow palette collection and I want to share with you guys the palettes that have similar shades or shades that are so similar to each other, like so close in color, they basically could be the same shade or they just don't make that big of a difference on your eyes, so they're like the same shade in the same palette. This idea is from Lauren Mae Beauty. She did this a while ago and I thought it was so phenomenal because there are definitely those palettes in my collection that I use and I'm just like, why are there these two different colors? They're identical on my eyes. They just, or sometimes they even swatch identical on your arm. It's like, why do you have them? You could have put a different color in here. And so when I watched that video, I was like, this is so genius. I definitely know I can relate here. I have a lot of palettes in my collection that I've thought this before, so that's the video we're doing today. I will have Lauren's original video down below in the description box, and of course I will also link to Linda or Glitter Fallout's YouTube video as well so you guys can watch hers. It's always fun to see, you know, what kind of collection people have or what palettes come to mind. I feel like I've probably forgotten some palettes. I went through as best I could yesterday and looked through all my palettes, so I have a good stack here. Some of them are super close, some of them are a little bit more farther. We'll get into it, so let's go ahead and just jump right in. So as I said, I have a ton of palettes to go through and some of them are like super close, like literally identical in my personal opinion, and other ones are a little bit farther apart, so I'm going to try my best to go from those that are the most identical and then kind of peter out to the ones that are like, okay Katie, I can see a reason for them both being in there, but obviously I don't. I feel like they're similar enough. So that's how I'm going to kind of structure this video. So for the very first one, the first palette that I thought of, because I remember thinking of this so vividly when I originally reviewed this palette, but it is the Mavie Cosmetics Take Me to Hong Kong palette, and it is these two colors right here, these two greens. They look a little different in the pan, but when you actually use them, they're really, I could not tell a difference. I remember using them, you know, separate in different eye looks, but then also the same, like in the same eye look, trying to get a gradient because they do look a little different. So I was like, maybe it'll, you know, make a good gradient. You couldn't tell a difference. I'll just swatch it right here. I'm gonna be a mess by the end of this video, but let's swatch them out. I probably shouldn't swatch on my knuckle, but anyway, I'm going to try to put them close enough so you guys can be able to see them fairly close together, but I don't know about you. Yeah, there are differences, but like they're so minute, it's like, yeah, no, there really is no difference. At least for me personally, anytime I use these, anytime I see these, I'm like, come on, they're not different. Like, why are these both, especially I think this is also more of an issue with smaller palettes because you are confined to just so many shadows. Like this is just 9, and for one of them to be wasted by being a duplicate, in my opinion, duplicate shadow, that's why I feel like most of the, you know, not outrage, you guys know what I mean, but most of the like, why did you put both of them in this palette? That's where that comes from because like I said, you only have 9 shadows. You could have put another color and I could have done, you know, something else with it, or, you know, be more creative with a different color in there, but these two are just so identical. So yeah, the Mavie Take Me to Hong Kong palette, definitely the very first palette that I thought of because I remember hammering this home so much when I actually originally reviewed this palette and just being so confused, like why? Why did you put those two greens? Because they're just so identical. I should also say that this video is going to be largely focused on smaller-ish palettes. There's a couple that are a little bit bigger, but I'm not really going to go to my really big palettes like those in the back there, or I'm trying to think of like my Playing and Makeup by Yolanda palette, the really big ones. My Fade to Hues from ColourPop. Those are, oh, forgot to remove that. Anyway, those are really big palettes, and those are definitely ones that I can see duplicates, but when it's a bigger palette, it's kind of like, okay, at least you got other shadows in there, and especially when it's a rainbow palette, I can see those as a little bit more forgiving. So that's why I'm focusing on the smaller palettes, because that's, like I already said, where I'm just kind of like, why did you waste a spot? You didn't have many to begin with. Anyway, the next palette that I found a duplicate is the Tartelette in Bloom from Tarte. Yes, I still have this palette. I used to love it back in the day before I got into color, but this palette most definitely has a lot of very close colors, but there are two shades in here that are literally duplicates, literally the same in here, and they're two different shadows. But they are Smoke Show and Activist here, the darker browns. I remember, you know, even back then using these, it was like, okay, I guess I can use it because then I won't, you know, if I run out of one, I can go on to the other one because they're that close. But that's one of them, and that's the other one. Oh yeah, this is a bracelet my daughter made me with a little beading kit she has. So anyway, there are those two. Yes, I can see little slight differences, but honestly, when you're working in an eye look, again, they look identical. There didn't, for me personally, didn't really need to be a reason for both of them to be in there, because whenever I did use this back in the day, I just used one or the other. Sometimes I even switched it up and dipped into both, you know, as I was going along, I would forget, I would be like, oh, I'll just go into this one, it doesn't really matter. Anyway, they are just so close in my personal opinion. Next up is the BK Beauty True Beauty palette. This one, there is a lot in here, again, that's similar. I feel like a lot of times the, you know, very neutral type of palettes can be guilty of this, and I don't understand why, because I feel like there's a variety of different hues to neutrals. But anyway, this one definitely still has that issue of having identical shades in here where literally I cannot tell a difference when I use them on my eyes. And that is Love here and Grace. And honestly, as I'm looking at it, I don't know if these are as close, but Glow and Amore, they're shimmers, they look really close too. I'm just going to swatch them for fun. But anyway, it was mainly the mattes that I thought about, because I remember when I was reviewing this palette, I was kind of like, take it or leave it, I can use either one. But then let's go ahead and just swatch the shimmers as well. Okay, they have different hues to them. But anyway, these are the swatches I was mainly talking about for this video. They're just so very similar. Yes, they're a little different, but honestly, it's like I could just kind of build this up to get what this is giving me. You know what I mean? That's how close they are. And it just seemed unnecessary to me. So that's why I wanted to go ahead and also include the True Beauty palette, because it just has those tones that are just so very similar. And I know maybe that's an unpopular opinion. If you're more into neutrals, maybe you can see a reason for such close colors. But for me personally, not being as into neutral colors when they're that close, I feel like I could take one or leave one. Both of them don't need to be in there for me personally. Okay, next up is the Kaleidos Futurism Sci-Fi Greens palette, or Futurism 1. This palette, again, was one that when I was, you know, using it originally and reviewing it, I was a little bit annoyed by how similar these greens are. Now, this is one of those that isn't like identical, so it's not as strong as the earlier ones we've talked about, but it's still a palette that was so very close. I wish there was more difference between them. So that's why I wanted to include this in the video, because it's definitely a fault or just an issue that I had originally when I first tried the palette. But it is the two greens, and maybe it's just because I have this thing with olive green tones. I just want more. And with these being so similar, it was kind of like, take one, leave one. I didn't need to use them both. I didn't need to have them both. It just really didn't matter when you were doing a look. You could use one or the other. So maybe that's why I'm a little bit more critical, because I do love my olive greens and I wish I could have every shade or every hue of olive green. Anyway, these I just feel like are very close. Again, not identical, not saying they stuck the same shadow in there twice, but still so close I wish they would have put something else in. Next up is Morphe x Jaclyn Hill Armed and Gorgeous palette. I remember thinking even when I reviewed this that there were some shades in here that were very similar. It didn't seem necessary, it seemed a bit overkill. And I could even say that with these two, those aren't as close, but definitely two that I saw. And as I was using, I was like, you don't need both of these deeper kind of reddish brownish tones. But the two that I'm going to be swatching today are these two up here. Or you know what? Let's just swatch them both, kind of like I did the previous video. I picked the palette out for these two. What is this? Agent and Security. These two shades right here, I just feel like even swatching them, they look close, and using them on the eyes, they look identical. Well, let's go ahead, since we're here and I have 4 fingers to swatch anyway, I'm gonna grab Prowl and Smooth Criminal, and let's swatch them out and see how close they are. Make sure my hand is dry, and just swatch it out. But yeah, I remember with this palette, they just, you know, the looks, even though I was using different shades, still looked so similar, because so many of these palettes, you know, so many of the colors in these palettes are just really similar. Okay, the browns, the darker browns, there is more of a difference there, so I can kind of see that. But these two, honestly, like, what do you guys think? I feel like they just look so similar, especially on the eyes when you're working it into a look, mixing it with other colors. I could never tell a difference. Okay, as much as I love my Midas Cosmetics Lemonade palette, I do have to admit there are 2 shades in here that look so so identical. And that's going to be these two shadows here. I feel like they look very different in the pan, but when you actually go to use them, there's like a softness to these colors that when you actually use them in a look, they kind of look identical. So that's kind of why I'm including them. But anyway, they're the yellow mattes, kind of like yellow lighter tone mattes, kind of like highlighter yellow. One is a touch more green, one is a touch more yellow. I mean, I feel like I need to build that up more. I don't know if my palette's going bad. It's going, how old is this? 2, 3 years? I think I got it when I was pregnant with Levi, and he's almost 2. So maybe the shadows aren't as pigmented. But anyway, I think you can see that there. I built it up a little bit more. I can barely tell a difference here. I feel like they're very close. Like I said, one is more yellow leaning, one is more green leaning, but honestly, when we're talking about a little bit more, it's like just much more. So, like I said, as much as I love my lemonade palette, and I still do love it even with those being so close, I still see it and wish they would have put something else, like maybe a deeper brown, because this could go a bit deeper. Again, maybe that would feel a little bit repetitive. I don't know. That's just something I noticed with this, is just they're so very close, you kind of could just use one or the other. You didn't need both. Okay, next up is the Masquerade by Juvia's Place. This actually has a couple that I feel like are pretty darn similar. Again, more with these bronzy tones down here. This one I can see a little bit more of a difference, but the two that I think are just so identical, I feel like they stuck the same shadow in there twice. These two I feel like are pretty close, but the two I'm going to be swatching today are these two actually, because I feel like when you use them on your eyes, if you're using them in your crease, what have you, they're basically identical in my personal opinion. I just feel like they're so very close. They didn't both need to be in here. So let's swatch them out. My hand is getting super stained at this point. But here they are swatched out. Sorry, I'm not going to pronounce the names. This Masquerade palette is pretty old. But anyway, there they are. You tell me what you think. I feel like those are so very close. It's like, you don't need both of them in there. And again, this is a larger palette, so I don't mind it as much. I feel like you have other shadows you can draw to, but still, when it comes to these neutral tones down here, I feel like it gets very repetitive, and especially having those two being so close, I feel like they could have put something else in there to kind of give, you know, help with a more gradient effect when it comes to neutrals, instead of sticking, you know, two shades that are almost identical, just like a touch different in tone. Again, that's just me personally and my thoughts when it comes to palettes, and when it comes to shades that are being that close, I just feel like it's a little bit unnecessary, but you'll have to tell me what you think. Okay, next up is the I Heart Beauty Tasty Avocado palette. This is a bit of a larger palette. We're getting a little bit bigger here, but I did want to include it because there were several shades in here when I was originally reviewing it that it just felt so close, so identical. It was kind of like, why? And I'm actually going to swatch 3. One of them might be a little bit different, but they are still so close. But I'm going to swatch Brunch, Bite, and Foodie. They're just all so very similar. And I remember when I was using them, it was kind of like, again, one or the other. You didn't need all of these in there. So here's one. I'm sorry, I didn't remember which order I swatched them in. Okay, so the bottom one is definitely different. It looks a lot more similar in the pan. But these top two, do you see a difference? One's a little bit more shiny and maybe sheerish than the other one. The other one's a little bit more pigmented. But again, I feel like, you know, I could just build this middle one up and get this in more shine, more shimmer than the top one. So it's kind of like, oh, what's the point of those two? I think those two are the first two, Brunch and Bite, that I swatched. So there you go. It's just kind of like, oh, let me go ahead and do Smash. I feel like Smash is more of a white blue, but hey. While we're here, let's just swatch it and see how close. Okay, this is definitely more of a shiny, but again, they're all just so similar. There's 4 shadows. These 3 definitely, maybe even these 2 are identical. The middle and the first. What do you guys think? Just so many in this palette that were so very close. I felt like it was unnecessary to have all of them in there. You could have had 1, 2, you know, that darker one. You could have had those 2, a light blue and a darker blue, and been set. And you could have saved 2 shadows to have some other color to add to this. So I feel like I could probably nitpick and, you know, pick out a couple more, but the blues were definitely very overpowering in this palette of just being so very similar. Alright, the e.l.f. and J. Kessa to the Rescue palette. This was another palette I thought of right away when I was sitting down to do this video, because I remember when I reviewed this palette, these 2 reds, one just looks like a worse version, like a worse formula than the other, but the color-wise they seemed the same because they were just so very close. So you guys can see what I mean. There's the red, not even a good red, like that was the better red. And there's the other one. Oh, these are terrible. They were bad back then, but ooh, age has not done anything for them. I'm really digging in there trying to get something up so you guys can actually see what I'm talking about. There we go. That's a little bit more. So there's the darker red, and then here's the bright red. That's not even that bright. Anyway, that is what they look like, swatched as best as I can. But when I use these in looks, I remember, you know, trying to use them both to do like a gradient, you know, going straight down, one for the crease, one for the outer corner, one for the lid. This looks so terrible because they were so close and identical. It looked like I just took one shade and very bad shade that was very patchy and blended out my crease and then stuck a shimmer on top because it just wasn't working. So yeah, I remember when I originally reviewed this, not being impressed at all with the red and thinking they were just so close. I wish there was more difference like the other shades. Like, I don't understand why the blues could be so far apart, the greens, the yellows. The oranges actually are pretty close now that I'm looking at it. The purples are far apart, and I love that aspect of a palette to just give you the rainbow in a light, dark, and shimmer. Like, that's perfect. What you can use the light for the crease. You can use the dark for the outer corner. I don't know why it changed down here to be so muddied. I wish they would have kept that difference. Let me try the oranges real quick. Okay, that is a little bit more of a difference. One orange is not very good. Still very close. It's like, I don't know, if you use that in a look, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference with these two oranges in the crease, which one was the darker, which one was the lighter, which one was different color, because they would have both just ended up looking identical. So there you go. That's another one. For this palette, we'll go ahead and call both the oranges and the reds super duper identical. I don't understand why they're both in this palette, because you could take one and leave the other kind of thing. Next up is the LA Girl Main Stage palette. This is the Desert Dream Main Stage palette. But this palette has a couple that I feel like were a little bit close. I would have liked a little bit more difference in it, but for the purposes of this video, I'm going to be swatching these two up here, because when you use these very dark shimmers in a look, they look the same. In my personal opinion, when they're so this deep, it kind of more so depends on the colors you use around it, like the mattes you use around it, to see what comes out more. Like, I know when I swatch these, one's going to look more blue, one's going to look more purple, but when you use them at a look, I really couldn't tell a difference, honestly. Like, anytime I use this this blue here in a look, I remember doing a look, finishing it, and I thought I had used this purple. That's how dark it looked, because I was pairing it more with the purple tones. So that's what I mean why I know these aren't similar, but I feel like they could have just used one of these, like maybe the blue, and that way, if they wanted to get more of a dark purple, they just could have paired it more and even mixed this in to the blue, and it would have given you more of that purple look, like mix these two together and you could have gotten that. So for me, this purple here just seems so unnecessary, because I feel like I have it with this shade and this shade together, and that's just something I noticed. Even though I tried to go like very blue and like with purple, you know, mattes in there, and then I tried to do the bright blue, I remember finishing the look and being like, oh wait, did I use the dark purple? But no, I rechecked. I had used this one. It just ended up looking more like the purple one because of the shadows around it. So that's why I feel like these two are unnecessary to have in the same palette when they're that dark and that deep. I don't know, it just felt repetitive to me. Alright, so that's gonna do it for me for this video. Those are all the palettes going through my collection. I'm so stained right now. Those are all the palettes going through my collection that stood out to me as being oh so very similar. There were a couple more that, again, were pretty close, but I tried to, you know, zone in on the ones that were very, very close in my opinion. And for me personally, in my makeup, you know, styling techniques and my makeup preferences when it comes to color and what, you know, what I like to see on my eyes, though the ones that we talked about in today's video are the ones that annoyed me the most, I guess you could say, and I just didn't see a purpose for them both being in the same palette, because they're just so close. I could take one and leave the other and have a different shadow in there, like I've said a million times in this video. So anyway, that's gonna do it for me for today's video. I cannot wait to see what Linda does and the types of palettes that she picks out to swatch for you, and we can all just kind of spend today, you know, talking about those palettes that are in our collection that are just, you know, have shadows that are so close. It's just like, you know, you think back to the people who develop it and put all these shadows together and are like, you know, did you guys not see this back then? Is it just us? Like, what's going on here? So anyway, let me know your thoughts down below, and let me know what palette you guys have in your collection that they are just so close that they're not necessary. I want to say here at the end, I always forget at the beginning, but thank you so much if you're coming over from Linda's channel, for checking out my channel and my video. I really do appreciate it. And Linda, thank you so much for doing this collab with me and being so very flexible. I know I've probably been like the most difficult and inconsistent and just difficult to touch base with collaborator that you've probably ever collaborated with. Thank you so much for having so much patience with me. I really do appreciate it, and I'm just sorry my hectic life just kind of happened all around when we're trying to, you know, do our collab together. So anyway, thank you so very much, Linda, for collaborating with me once again. I really do appreciate it. And with all that said, that's gonna do it for me. I will see you guys very soon in my next one. Bye, guys.